Have you ever looked at someone else's life and felt a sudden, quiet weight settle in your chest? Not because you wish them ill, not because you are bitter, but because they are standing exactly where you once deeply hoped to be. You see them thriving in a space you meant to occupy. You realize they started earlier, moved faster, or simply took the chance that you hesitated to take. And in the silence of that realization, a harsh, unforgiving thought echoes in your mind. I am too late. I missed my chance. If you have ever felt this specific kind of exhaustion, the quiet grief of feeling left behind, the anxiety of a ticking clock, the heavy burden of watching someone else live the dream you kept waiting to pursue, this is for you. Stay until the end, because the way you see this pain is about to change forever. We often believe that our suffering comes from failure, but most of your suffering is not caused by what happened. It is caused by how tightly you are holding on to the illusion of how things were supposed to happen. We create a rigid timeline in our minds. We draw a map of where we should be by a certain age or a certain year. And when we look up and see someone else crossing a finish line we haven't even started toward, a deep sense of unworthiness takes root. We punish ourselves. We look at their success not as a beautiful possibility, but as evidence of our own failure. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that suffering arises from attachment. In this specific pain, it is the attachment to an imaginary timeline. We cling to a ghost, the phantom of our unlived life. We torture ourselves with the thought that there was only one train to our destination, and because we did not run fast enough, it has departed without us forever. Imagine a traveler standing at the edge of a vast, ancient forest. They look ahead and see another traveler, miles in the distance, already resting in a beautiful sunlit clearing. Instead of taking a single step on their own path, the first traveler sits down in the dust. They become exhausted, not by the effort of walking, but by the crushing weight of watching the other person. They weep for the miles they haven't walked. They punish themselves for starting late, entirely forgetting one beautiful truth. The forest is endless, and it holds countless clearings. In our modern lives, we sit in the dust far too often. We scroll through images of other people's achievements, their creative breakthroughs, their perfect milestones. And with every image, we silently deduct value from our own existence. We confuse someone else's harvest season with our own planting season. We tell ourselves that because they are already there, our journey no longer matters. Think about your own life. What dream, what goal, what quiet hope are you holding back on, simply because someone else got there first? What are you afraid will happen if you start now? Ask yourself this: is the thought that you are too late bringing you peace? Or is it only feeding your fear? You do not have to carry this burden anymore. Pause, breathe. Notice how heavy it feels to carry another person's timeline on your shoulders. You can put it down. Observe the thought of being left behind, but do not invite it to stay. Let it rise, let it pass. Because there is a profound difference between being inspired by another person's journey and using their journey as a weapon against yourself. And learning to tell the difference is where the next truth begins. 2. The line between admiration and self-punishment. Here is a truth that is painful to admit. The inspiration you seek has quietly turned into a weapon against your own soul. It starts innocently. You admire someone. You see a person who has built the life you are still dreaming of. Perhaps it is a friend who found their purpose years ago, or a stranger whose creative work moves you deeply. At first, you feel inspired, but slowly, the admiration turns heavy. It shifts into comparison. Every time you look at their progress, a quiet voice in your mind whispers, "You should be there by now." You begin to use their early start as proof of your own failure. You look at their beautiful life and use it to brutally tear down your own. This is the heavy trap of self-punishment disguised as observation. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that suffering is born when we resist reality. When we constantly compare our current situation to someone else's destination, we are violently rejecting the present moment. We attach our peace to an external measure that was never ours to begin with. Buddhism reminds us that no two journeys share the same rhythm. To suffer over someone else's timeline is to be trapped in an illusion. It is a failure to see the truth of your own unique existence. Imagine two seeds planted side by side in the dark earth. One is a fast-growing vine, and the other is a bamboo seed. In a matter of days, the vine breaks the soil. It climbs quickly, stretching its bright leaves toward the sun, fully visible to the world. But for years, the bamboo shows absolutely nothing on the surface. If the bamboo could think, it might look at the vine and feel profound despair. It might call itself a failure. It might believe it has entirely missed its chance at the sun. But in the quiet darkness, the bamboo is building a massive, unbreakable root system. When it finally breaks the surface, it will grow incredibly fast. And when the great storms come, the shallow vine may be swept away, while the bamboo will gracefully bend in the wind, rooted deeply in the earth. In our modern world, we are constantly surrounded by vines. We open our screens and are flooded with images of early starters, young prodigies, and overnight success. We feel a crushing pressure to keep up. When we feel we are falling behind, we feel a quiet shame. We let the achievements of others make us feel invisible. We forget about the roots we are building in the dark. Think about your own life. When you look at someone who started earlier than you, do you feel an expansion in your heart or a tightening in your chest? Are you allowing their light to show you what is possible, or are you using it to cast a dark shadow over your own worth? Pause, breathe. The next time you feel the sting of comparison, just observe it. Let the feeling rise without making it your identity. You do not have to fight the thought, just watch it pass. Quietly remind yourself, their path is beautiful and mine is still unfolding. You cannot grow if you are constantly poisoning your own soil with resentment. Punishing yourself for not being further along will never give you the energy to take the next step. It only drains the strength you need to begin. And releasing that punishment is the only way to see your true path clearly, because the timeline you are mourning is not real at all. 3. The illusion of a single timeline. What if the race you feel you are losing does not actually exist? Here is a truth that is difficult to accept, yet entirely liberating. You are suffering over a schedule that was completely made up. We live our lives convinced that there is a master clock ticking in the background of the universe. We tell ourselves there are absolute deadlines for happiness, success, and purpose. If someone else reaches a milestone at 25 and you are still searching at 40, a profound anxiety takes over. You feel like a student who has run out of time on a test, watching everyone else hand in their completed papers. You spend your days apologizing to yourself for being late, exhausted from sprinting to catch a train that never belonged to you. In Buddhist thought, attaching ourselves to a fixed idea of how time should unfold is a heavy source of pain. One of the deepest lessons of Buddhism is that reality is not rigid. It is fluid, ever-changing, and deeply personal. We suffer because we try to force the vast, unpredictable nature of our lives into a tiny, straight box of human expectation. When we let go of the illusion that there is a single, correct timeline for things to happen, the panic begins to slowly fade. Imagine a wide, powerful river flowing toward the ocean. Many people put their small boats into the water and row furiously, fighting the natural currents, desperate to reach the sea as fast as possible. If they look over their shoulder and see a boat far ahead of them, they panic, they row harder, they become blind to the beauty of the water around them. But the river does not flow in a straight, rigid line. It curves, It winds through deep valleys. It creates quiet, still pools under the shade of ancient trees. A boat resting in a quiet bend is not behind, the boat rushing through the rapids. It is simply experiencing a different part of the water. In modern life, we forget this completely. We look at a colleague stepping into a high position, a friend finding a lifelong partner, or an artist receiving sudden recognition, and our chest tightens. The fear of being left behind becomes overwhelming. We believe we are running out of time to be happy or useful. We measure our entire worth by the years that have passed, completely ignoring the unique depth of the life we have actually lived. We try to force the river to move faster, and we drown in the effort. Think about your own life. Who handed you the timeline you are using to judge yourself? Whose invisible clock are you trying to beat? What are you holding on to that says you have failed simply because you have not arrived yet? Pause, breathe, feel the weight of this imaginary schedule. Now, choose to put it down. Observe the thought without following it. You are not running late. You are not behind schedule. Let the rushing feeling pass through you like wind through an open window. Stop trying to force the door open before you have even found the key. The timeline you are holding onto is only a thought. It is not real. But the pain it causes is very real. You cannot embrace the life you have if you are constantly mourning the life you thought you were supposed to have by now. And this is where the hardest work begins. Because to find your true quiet strength, you must first face the phantom you have been chasing. 4. Releasing the ghost of your unlived life. What if the heaviest thing you carry is a life that never even existed? Here is the truth few people want to face. The deepest grief you feel when watching someone else succeed is not truly about them. It is about a ghost. It is the phantom of the person you believe you should be by now. You sit quietly in the present moment, but your mind is violently mourning an alternate reality. A reality where you did not hesitate, where you started earlier, where you took the risk, moved to the new city, or trusted your own voice. You are silently grieving a version of yourself that lives only in your imagination. And because this ghost is perfect, because it never fails, never gets tired, and never makes mistakes, your real, beautifully flawed life will always feel like a failure by comparison. In Buddhist thought, attachment to what is not real is a profound source of suffering. We often think of attachment as clinging to physical things or to people, but Buddhism reminds us that the most dangerous clinging is often to our own thoughts. We attach ourselves to an imagined past, completely abandoning the only place where peace can exist, right here. To constantly replay the what-ifs is to refuse the reality of this exact moment. Imagine standing in a quiet, empty hallway, staring desperately at a heavy, locked door. Behind that door is the life you think you missed. The chance you did not take. You stand there for years, rattling the handle, leaning your weight against the wood, crying for the door to open. But the door will never open. Not because you are unworthy, but because the door is painted on the wall. It is an illusion. Meanwhile, directly behind you, a window is wide open, the sky is bright, the air is fresh, but you cannot feel the breeze, and you cannot see the sky, because you refuse to turn your back on the locked door. In our modern lives, we stare at this painted door every single day. We watch someone else launch the project we always dreamed of. We see someone living with the quiet confidence we secretly crave. Instantly, our mind throws us back to the hallway. We replay old choices. We punish ourselves for every hesitation. We tell ourselves that because we did not walk through that specific door at that specific time, we are entirely lost. We let the achievements of others blind us to the open windows waiting in our own lives right now. Think about your own life. What ghost are you still feeding with your precious energy? What are you afraid will happen if you finally forgive yourself for waiting? Is this constant replaying of the past bringing you peace, or is it feeding your fear? Pause, breathe, observe the thought of your unlived life without following it into the darkness. Stop trying to force the door open. Let the feeling of regret rise. Acknowledge it gently, and then release it. You do not have to carry a map to a place that does not exist. You can choose to turn around. You can choose to step into the light of the life you actually have, because letting go of the ghost is the only way to make space for the truth. But releasing the past is only part of the journey. To truly find peace, you must uncover the quiet reason why you waited in the first place. 5. The deep roots of the delayed journey. What if your delay was never a sign of failure, but a quiet necessity? Here is a truth that goes against everything the modern world demands. You did not wait because you were broken. You waited because you were not ready. When we look back at the years we spent hesitating, we often feel a crushing shame. We see someone else who moved quickly, who built their life with certainty, and we punish ourselves for not doing the same. We tell ourselves we were lazy, cowardly, or simply lost. We look at the time spent standing still, and we call it wasted time. We carry a silent, heavy anger toward our past selves. We believe that if we had just forced ourselves to push harder, we would not feel so left behind right now. Buddhist wisdom teaches us the profound truth of causes and conditions. Nothing in this universe happens in isolation. A flower does not bloom simply because it decides to. It blooms when the soil, the water, and the sunlight are finally aligned. Buddhism reminds us to practice deep compassion for the journey that brought us here. We must look at our past with eyes of understanding, not eyes of judgment. To condemn yourself for not starting earlier is to entirely ignore the invisible storms you were quietly surviving at the time. You cannot demand a summer harvest from a winter season. Imagine a seed buried deep in the frozen earth. Above ground, the winter winds are harsh, bitter, and cold. The seed does not push through the soil. It stays hidden. It stays completely still in the absolute dark. If we judged the seed by the standards of the world, we might call it a failure. We might say it is wasting its potential while other plants are already grown in warmer climates, but the seed is acting with ancient wisdom. It knows that to break the surface now would be fatal. It is waiting for the warmth. It is waiting for the right conditions to survive. Its stillness is not death. Its stillness is protection. In our own lives, we forget this quiet wisdom. We forget the unseen burdens we were carrying during the years we supposedly wasted. We look at someone who started their career early, or created their art without fear, and we ask, why couldn't I do that? We forget that perhaps we were exhausted from just trying to get through the day. Perhaps you were untangling deep family conflict, battling a silent fear of failure, or carrying a heavy sadness that no one else could see. We compare our darkest, most frozen winters to someone else's bright and effortless spring. We forget that when we thought we were just standing still, we were actually gathering the invisible strength needed to survive. Think about your own life. When you look back at the years you spent waiting, can you see the heavy weather you were enduring? What if the version of you that hesitated was actually protecting you until you were strong enough to begin? Pause, breathe, offer a moment of grace to the past version of yourself. Let the harsh judgment rise in your mind, then soften it with understanding. You do not need to apologize for the time it took you to heal. The time you spent waiting was not empty. It was preparing you. But you cannot use the strength you gathered if your mind is still trapped in the past. And this is where the true pivot happens. Because the energy you are using to regret the past is the exact energy you need to step forward. 6. Returning your energy to the present. What if your deep exhaustion is not caused by the journey ahead, but by the energy you are leaving behind in a past that no longer exists? Here is a quiet truth. When you look at someone who started earlier and feel that sharp sting of self-punishment, it takes an immense amount of mental energy. You are actively pulling power away from your own life. Every time you replay a missed opportunity, every time you silently calculate how far behind you are scattering your focus. We often tell ourselves we are tired because the mountain in front of us is too high. We believe we lack the talent or the drive that other people seem to possess. But you do not lack ability, you lack presence. Your energy is entirely spent keeping the ghost of your past alive. In Buddhist thought, mindfulness is not just about relaxation, it is about gathering your scattered energy back to the only place it has any real power. Buddhism teaches that suffering arises when our body is here, but our mind is wandering through the ruins of yesterday or the illusions of tomorrow. When we pull our awareness back from comparison and regret, we reclaim the vital force needed to actually live. To constantly focus on someone else's timeline is to willingly drain your own spirit. Imagine a magnificent, heavy stone fountain designed to shoot water high into the sunlit sky. But over the years, small cracks have formed at the base. Before the water can ever build the pressure needed to rise, it leaks out quietly into the dirt. The fountain appears broken. It seems powerless. But the water source itself is entirely pure and strong. The only problem is that the water is leaking into places that do not matter. To see the water rise, the cracks must simply be sealed. In our daily lives, comparison is the crack in the stone. We wake up with a fresh reservoir of energy, but the moment we check a screen and see someone else's milestone, a crack opens. We pour our mental water into resentment. We pour it into shame. We pour it into wishing we had started 10 years ago. By the time we sit down to do our own work, to heal our own hearts, or to build our own dreams, the reservoir is completely empty. We have nothing left to give to our own beautiful life. Think about your own life. Where is your energy leaking right now? How much of your daily thought is spent maintaining a story of failure rather than watering the seeds of your actual life? What could you build today if you stopped funding the regrets of yesterday? Pause, breathe, let that sink in. Notice where your mind has drifted. When the thought of being too late arises, treat it like a crack in the stone. Gently seal it. Do not fight the thought. Simply refuse to pour any more of your energy into it. Bring your attention back to your hands, your breath, your immediate reality. You are not powerless. You simply need to bring your power back to where you stand. Do your part, then release the outcome. Because when you stop pouring your energy into the journey you did not take, you will finally notice the quiet, hidden gifts waiting on the path you are actually walking. And this is where the true beauty of waiting is finally revealed. 7. The wisdom gained from watching. What if the years you spent on the sidelines were not wasted, but deeply necessary? Here is a truth that is easy to overlook when you are drowning in comparison. You believe that because you were not actively running the race, you were doing nothing. You look at the people who started earlier and assume their early action makes them wiser. You feel a deep shame for being a spectator in your own life. You convince yourself that while they were out building their dreams, making bold moves, and gathering experience, you were simply frozen. You look at your quiet years and see only empty space. But in Buddhist thought, conscious observation is one of the highest forms of practice. The role of the witness is never truly passive. Buddhism reminds us that action driven by blind panic or ego often leads to suffering. Sometimes, standing still and watching the world move is exactly how we learn the truth of things. When you are not desperately rushing to be seen, you are granted a rare and beautiful clarity. The years you spent watching were not empty. They were a profound period of gathering wisdom. Imagine a vast, unpredictable ocean. A crowd of people rushes headfirst into the freezing, turbulent water, desperate to prove their bravery and reach the other side. They fight the violent waves. They are battered by unseen rocks. They exhaust themselves fighting currents they do not understand. But one person stays on the quiet shore. For a long time they just watch. To the crowd, this person looks terrified. They look like a failure. But the quiet watcher is studying the pattern of the tides. They are learning where the hidden rocks lie. They are watching how the wind changes the water. When the watcher finally steps into the sea, they do not thrash or fight. They move with the current. They swim with a quiet, deliberate grace that can only come from deep observation. In our modern lives, we are taught to throw ourselves into the freezing water immediately. We feel the crushing pressure to launch the project, build the career, or figure out our lives before we even understand who we are. When we stay quiet, when we take our time and watch others go first, we call ourselves cowards. We forget the massive advantage of observation. By watching others start earlier, you have seen their early mistakes. You have witnessed their burnout. You have seen what truly brings them joy and what is just empty noise. You have gathered a quiet intelligence that the early starters had to learn through exhaustion. Think about your own life. What deep truths have you learned simply by watching the world around you? What painful mistakes have you avoided because you had the silent patience to observe before you acted? Are you ready to stop calling your observation cowardice and start recognizing it as wisdom? Pause, breathe, look back at your quiet years with gratitude. Honor the time you spent on the shore. You do not need to apologize for learning the rhythm of the water before you stepped in. You have gathered everything you need. You are not empty-handed, because the strength you have built is not loud, frantic, or desperate. It is something much deeper. And learning how to trust that depth is where your true power lies. 8. Discovering the power of quiet strength. What if the strength you are looking for was never supposed to make a sound? Here is a truth that is easily drowned out by the noise of modern life. We live in a world that worships loud, fast, explosive action. We are taught to equate success with visibility and progress with speed. Because you waited, because your path took longer, you might feel a deep, lingering sense of weakness. You watch others boldly announce their victories, claim their space, and move with a loud confidence you feel you lack. You look at their sweeping movements and mistake your own quietness for inadequacy. We punish ourselves for not being a firework, entirely forgetting that a firework fades in a matter of seconds. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that true power does not need to roar. The most profound strength is found in stillness, endurance, and an unshakable presence. In Buddhist thought, the ego demands noise and constant external validation, but the spirit rests in silence. We are reminded that trying to force the world to see you is often a sign of internal fear, not true power. Real strength is not the ability to aggressively push your way to the front of the line. It is the ability to remain deeply rooted, completely unbothered by who is walking ahead of you. Imagine the vast ocean during a massive, howling hurricane. On the surface, the water is violent and chaotic. Giant waves crash into each other with terrifying speed, demanding attention, moving with frantic energy. The surface is loud, aggressive, and impossible to ignore. But if you dive just 100 feet below that frantic surface, the water changes. It becomes completely, beautifully still. It is quiet and entirely undisturbed by the panic happening above. The deep water holds massive, unimaginable pressure and force, but it does not need to crash against the rocks to prove it exists. In our daily lives, we spend far too much time trying to be the surface of the water. We want to be instantly noticed in our careers, our art, or our relationships. We measure our strength by how much noise we can make and how fast we can make it. When we see someone else crashing visibly onto the shore of success, we feel desperately weak for being so quiet. We mistake their visibility for absolute value. We forget that the quiet years we spent waiting, observing, and surviving have built a tremendous depth within us. We have become the deep water. Think about your own life. Are you exhausted from trying to manufacture a storm just to prove you are moving? What would happen if you stopped trying to match the loud, frantic pace of everyone else? Is your desire to rush coming from a place of true purpose or from a desperate need to be seen? Pause. Breathe. Feel the quiet weight resting in your own bones. Drop beneath the noisy surface of your own mind. You do not have to shout to be real. You do not need to rush to be worthy. Let the desperate need to catch up simply fall away. Rest in the quiet strength you have spent all these years building in the dark. Because true strength does not care who arrived first. It only cares about how deeply you stand when you finally arrive. And realizing this brings you to the final and most beautiful truth of your delayed journey. 9. Your path was waiting for you. What if you were never actually late? At the beginning of our journey together, we talked about that sudden, heavy weight in your chest. We talked about the profound exhaustion of watching someone else stand exactly where you hoped to be, and the unforgiving voice that whispered you had missed your only chance. You carried the crushing burden of self-punishment, convincing yourself that your hesitation was a fatal flaw. You looked at the years you spent waiting and called them a failure. But now, you can see the truth clearly. The master clock you were so desperate to beat was entirely invented by your own mind. The rigid timeline you mourned was just a ghost. The river you were trying to force has its own ancient winding rhythm, and you cannot demand a summer harvest from a winter season. You see now that the people who started earlier did not steal your destiny. They did not take your place in the world. They simply walked their own unique path, while yours was quietly, patiently waiting for you to gather the strength to begin. Buddhist wisdom teaches us the absolute, unshakable power of this very moment. When you finally let go of the punishing need to compare, when you release your grip on the unlived life, you are no longer at war with reality. True non-attachment does not mean you give up on your dreams. It means you stop demanding that life follow a rigid, imaginary script. It means you stop torturing yourself for not being a vine, and finally trust the deep bamboo roots you have built in the dark. Think about your own life right now as you listen to this. Can you feel the heavy armor starting to fall away? Can you feel the space opening up inside your chest? When you stop pouring your precious energy into regretting the past, it floods powerfully into the present. You no longer need to look over your shoulder to see who is walking ahead of you. You no longer need to be the loud, frantic wave crashing on the surface just to prove you exist. You can rest in the quiet, undisturbed depth of the water below. Pause, breathe. Feel the solid earth beneath you in this exact moment. Gently forgive yourself for the time you spent waiting. Forgive yourself for the years you spent hiding in the frozen soil, gathering your strength. Your delay was never a waste of time. It was the exact, necessary preparation required for you to hold the beauty of your actual life. You do not have to chase a phantom anymore. You do not have to run breathlessly to catch a train that was never meant for you. The time for punishing yourself is over. The journey you are meant to take is waiting for you, right here, right now. If these lessons touched your heart, share this video with someone who may need a little more peace today. You can let go now.